I first encountered the speaker at an OSPI, I think it was a day-long conference or something, probably about 7 or 8 years ago. And it was down at St. Martin's. And that was, people, I had heard the name, but I had never seen the person. And then I was like, oh, now I see what they're talking about. And then even since then, I've been to conferences, and she's done workshops, even here at Seattle U. And people around the community have been so impacted by her work that in the planning of this conference, again, like I said, we had decided we're going to keep our keynotes and our workshop presenters local. Her name kept coming up as someone who could really help move us along with this conversation around implicit racial bias, and particularly about what do we do about this, or what are some of the things that we need to be thinking about as we're continuing to immerse ourselves in this work. So with that, she's a professor at St. Martin's down in Lacey, and her bio's in the program if you want a more academic discourse or narrative about what she does. And she has an extensive website, and there's a lot of information about her and her book and the work that she does. And I'm going to let her explain a little more about that. So if you would like to help me welcome Leticia Nieto.
If an egg is broken by an outside force, life ends. If broken by an inside force, life begins. This liberation idea, this liberation project is an inside job. This is something that has to do with our interior and the interior of our collectives, and it's something that we invite to emerge, right? Rather than something that we can impose, require, legislate, although we should still try. But psychologically speaking, which is where I come from, you should, defend against all things psychological, since that's where I'm coming from. There is this idea in developmental psychology that you cannot tug on the plant to make it grow, right? You can't pull on it or scream at it or anything. What can you do? You can create conditions. You can understand what you can understand about what it takes to bring about optimum development. And then the plant will grow. The humans will awaken. The world will change. Which doesn't mean we shouldn't do all the other things too. But this is basically going to be an approach that understands that basic principle of change. That when it comes to transformation, it really comes from within. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to be talking to you really fast, which is fine. I went to a workshop. People were talking really fast. It was awesome. I'm telling you. I don't know how. They got so much done. It was incredible. And they even let us talk to each other, which I'm not going to let you do, but it was amazing. Really awesome workshop. Okay, so I'm going to share with you a 3-layered model. And where this comes from for me is understanding that most of the difficulty with the conversations around anti-oppression that I was observing in the 80s and 90s really had to do with category errors. People were making sense on both sides of difficult conversations, but they were talking at different levels to each other. And so I took it upon myself to try to sort that out. And I came up with, I think my original was like 7 levels, but it's down to 3 manageable levels. 3 levels of making meaning around the question of difference and power. I'm using words that we normally use for other things, so I'll need to define my terms here. Basically, my message is, in the center is this idea of power. Not power over, not social power, but true power, which is vitality, life force, clarity, all those kind of things. And then I associate that to the person, power person, the authentic self, the you that you really are, all that stuff. On the next level is rank, which is a robotic, programmed and programmable layer, which is profoundly unconscious, which is a lot of where our work is today. is the layer of rank. I'm calling it rank because I like the idea that it smells bad, and I like the idea that you wear it and that it's ascribed. And then in the outermost layer, you have this idea of status, which I'm associating to strings, like strings that a puppet might have. And this is our reactive, interactive, behavioral, observable layer. So that's basically the whole thing. Thank you very much. Okay, now I'll go ahead and tell you. So let's go back to power. Power is all about all these impossible to language things. So I've come up with a geometry for understanding this concept of power. The first one is to think about an axis that goes right through your center, connecting you vertically, right? We all associate, many of us associate, especially in the Christendom culture, to anything angelic or elevated, inspiration that comes from above. If I go like this, I have a priestly attitude, right? So when we lift up our eyes, our head, even our what is this bone? Our sternum. We lift up because there's something, there's an eagle that flew, there's a mountain, there's the moon, there's a sense of our place in the universe, which is really enormous, and we lift up for inspiration. But that axis also has another side, which is the thing that grounds you all the way down to the center of the earth. For those of you that are martial artists or otherwise, connected down. I've studied flamenco for a number of years. I'm never going to learn it. It's just the way that it is. But I study it anyway. And in flamenco, we're taught to be vertical with our back, but grounded. So really good flamenco dancers can make their upper body lift up and out, and their lower body ground into the center of the earth. So in flamenco, we anchor down and we wait for an energetic quality that comes up through the feet and then takes us over and invites us to sing, play, or dance. And so that's another side of the same idea, fire and sky. And that's just one. There's also a line that you can draw through a body as to what happens behind and in front. So there are the people who have come before me and now stand behind me. My whole ancestral line, all the people who came before me professionally or otherwise. And then in front of me are all the people that I serve, or my offspring, or the people who will read my book, or whatever, right? So it's all of the people in front of me. And if I walk into a room all by myself, right, I'm really wasting a tremendous amount of energy, because if I enter into a room with at least 7 generations behind me and 7 generations ahead of me, I have a big crowd of people, right, that I am able to call upon. So, when you get ready to not throw the thing in the compost or in the right place, and you think about 7 generations ahead or behind, you just do it. You just do one more little effort, and you make it happen. Think about the line that goes this way, which is about being connected on a side-by-side, shoulder-to-shoulder way. This is what we do when we march, right? We walk forward. Who are we convincing, really? We're pretty much just the people who came. But it doesn't matter, because the displacement of air with purpose, with clarity of intention, absolutely has and will continue to change the world. This is also connected to the idea that people who are working together are not necessarily in complete and absolute agreement. Right? My favorite sense of this is going to a pride event on a different town, because I'm not ready to go to the one in my own town because I work at St. Martin's and I'm not really out. Been there 26 years. Nobody's really catching on. Anyway, it's all good. So I go far, far away to Portland maybe, right? Or Seattle. Go to pride somewhere else. I'm just wearing like my button or something, I'm being mellow, and it's all very, very nice, and I'm not even walking, I'm just there, because you have to be there. And all of a sudden I see somebody else who works where I work, across the way. My first thought is, what are you doing here? Right? And they're looking at me the same way. And it's like 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000. Wait a second. You're here, or are you just shopping at that store? Or are you here? Are you here? Rainbow t-shirt. They're here. Something happens in that moment of realizing this person that I've been on committees with and I can't stand, right? And obviously they can't stand me. Now we walk in the hallway and we just go, I know that you know that I know that you know that I know that. And guess what? Even though we really don't work the same way, we have really different styles, when we have been on committees together, the truth is we are working on the same project from a different angle. So all the people who are working on the same project with you all over the world throughout all of time are in this line with you, which is so long it actually is a circle. So people who are politically opposed to you, way over there, you don't know what event they're going to show up at. That actually will show you just how much shoulder to shoulder you are with them. Okay. There's also a sense of the power that we are connected to underneath ourselves, because we think we have the capacity to just walk around, right, and be autonomous from the earth. Just so hilarious. Like, we think that we walk on the earth, but not of the earth. So funny. But the fact is, we're exactly like those trees in Northern California, the redwood trees. You look at the redwood trees and you see several trees, but really it's one system of trees. In fact, one botanist told me it's one tree, it just looks like several trees because the root system is really comprehensive. We are exactly like that. We influence each other profoundly. We are mostly made out of space. We interpenetrate all over the place. Listening to an Invisibilia episode on the way here this morning, they're talking about what they can do with the lasers to make the atoms become blended, and then they can do something to an atom over here, and the same thing happens to an atom over there. Or there's a thing where they can give you some drug or do some relaxation thing to you, and your blood changes, and they can then, at another point or with a different person, take your blood out, not all of it, just a little bit, put it on the thing over there on magnifying, and whatever they do to you, your blood still changes. Or the folks who've gone out into space and they've come up with this idea of the overview effect that the astronauts experience. It's actually called the overview effect. They go away, they're really busy, they're working on all of these science things on their way there, but on the way back, mostly they're just coasting, some of them. They're just watching the Earth, as they come back. And something happens to them. They have a realization, that's my home. Everybody that I know exists is on that. There is no division between them. Not only that, anything that happens to that happens to me, even though I'm not on it. And my favorite one after another, astronauts saying, we have this passion, we want to go to space, we want to investigate, we want to learn, we want to get to know this big universe. And then it dawns on them, we're in space. Like the Earth. I love that. So this is what I mean by power. What you connect with, the virtues and strengths and potencies that you connect with when you tap into any of these dimensions, right? And when you can do that, then of course dynamics of socialization are partially neutralized, and difficulties communicating across difference resolve, at least temporarily. Even in the movie Crash, that dude, he lifts the car and pulls the woman out. It's like, yeah, you have to have, either you have to go out into space, you have to have a really profound spiritual discipline, you have to be really ecologically wise and connected, you have to have lived many lifetimes or something, or you have to have a terrible disaster, and then we all transcend. But what do we do day to day? Day to day we have to attend to these other layers as well. So let's go to status play next, which is basically all the stuff that we can pay attention to. I don't know how well you can see these images, but there's strings on all of us. And this outermost layer is incredibly easy to observe, right? So we can observe the two status play styles. I like to make everything really alliterative. Status styles and status strings, which start and stop. This is where the outer layer is observable, and we can either play high status or low status. There's no in between. We go back and forth between playing high status and low status. It's very perceptible, very obvious. You can notice it even at a distance without being able to hear the conversation between people or between animals. It's quick changing. Somebody can be playing high status and the next moment can be playing low status. It's discrete in time. It starts and it stops. Anyone can play high status. A child can say to an adult, I hate you, you're stupid. And in that moment, the child is playing high status, the adult has been relegated to a low status position. And then something happens in the next moment which, quote, corrects the dynamic. No matter who you are in terms of your social memberships, you can play high status, but the cost will be different. The cost will be different. The status layer can lead us astray because it relates to how we perceive. It has to do with how we take in information and the fact that we don't know all the misinformation we take in. It goes like this. There's a game called Man Bites Dog. So you'll have to bear with me for a second. It's a card game. You get some cards with words on them. Your task is to create a headline in order to win the game. If you have the word dog and the word man and the word bites and you lay them down, dog bites man, you don't get very many points because it's not a headline. Why is it not a headline? Happens all the time. It's not a big deal, really. Man bites dog. It's a headline. Now just walk with me really slowly. Every headline on your internal news channel and on the external news channel follow the same principle. If it happens all the time, you don't hear about it. It's a headline because it has a quality of being infrequent. But then it turns into a worldview of normalization. So whatever it is that our external perception is on status play becomes our worldview. If we had a whole semester, we could talk more about that, but instead, just believe me for now. Status is about who wins, who loses, who's in, who's out, who's above, who's below, who's behaving well, who's behaving badly. But it clearly is not the whole story. It is the basis of humor. Everything about our humor brain, the part of our brain, I always picture it somewhere back here, is about status shifts. It's about the expectation that somebody's going to be here and then suddenly they're down here, or the anticipation that someone is here, but that's only a setup in order for them to be here, right? Animals do it, right? We used to have this cat that was, turns out, feral. We didn't know. And the way he would approach everything is to be extraordinarily huge with his energy, right? So we put food down. We had 3 cats, 2 tame and 1 feral. And he would walk around the food like this, displaying high status behaviors. I'm in charge, I'm in control, I'm the one who matters. And he would eat. If the other cats came around, they got bopped on the head. When he was done, other cats could eat. Maybe you know some administrators or other people like that. The dynamic is, I matter, you matter less. I control the conversation, I crowd into your space, I ask all the questions, I dominate. That's high status behavior. Anybody can do it. Anybody can do it unless you're an infant or in a coma, but mostly everybody can do it. Low status behavior is about being on the receiving end of that and accommodating that. It's all about you. Where would you like to go to lunch? What's your name? Charlotte, where would you like to go to lunch? Anywhere I want to go. But no, but let's go where you want to go. No, let's go where I want to go. No, let's go where you want to go. Low status people don't like to make decisions. So we will spend, in the Pacific Northwest is a little bit famous for this, we will spend a lot of time making sure we win at the who is more civil and patient game. I can wait you out, man, forever. It's another form of trying to control the environment and the conversation, right? So high status is not bad and low status is not good. High status can involve physical violence. It can go all the way up to murder or massive acts of violence. Low status can look and be very much respectful and careful, but it can go into deep caution and suspicion, right? So what is it called? The Seattle chill, right? The Seattle freeze. So that's worse than chill. The Seattle freeze is all about, oh, let's get together. Never. I'm not really prepared to exchange time and space with you. I'm just going to behave as though I would. That's low status, and it's just as violent in many ways. The map that we looked at this morning from the implicit bias distribution in terms of who took the test, I think we need another test that assesses, that accommodates for the Seattle freeze, right? Something that helps us know if it's about politeness or if it's about real conviction. Okay, so high is not necessarily hostile. When we play high status, we might be in the process of exchanging communication about intimacy. You know, the people that you really relax with and you play with are the people you're closest to. And the people you're more cautious with are the people you have less connection to. So don't be led too far astray with status dynamics. They are observable, but they are not necessarily going to inform us well. For one thing, they can go both directions. That should make you suspicious right there. And for another, they exist in time discretely so that we can observe them. So let's notice the difference between a sound in this room. Can you hear it? The sound of the equipment? It's not very loud, but kind of like a, right? And then there's me talking, starting, stopping. Status dynamics start and stop. So they only capture your attention when they are right in front of you, jumping out. You go to somebody's house and you go, you don't go. Because they will ignore you. The stuff that goes on all of the time and that you can ignore, I'm calling rank. The stuff that's going on all of the time, pervading every interaction, within, around, everywhere, at the social level, at the robotic level, I'm calling that rank. It is like a river, it only flows in one direction, consistently and continually advantaging members of dominant, or I call them agent groups, and consistently and continually marginalizing and disadvantaging members of target groups. Okay? That's going on all of the time, but mostly not observably, especially in the Pacific Northwest. When something happens that's really big and it draws our attention, the question is this a status-only experience? Or is this an example, a status example, of a much larger, much more pervasive structure of rank? Because it could be really big, but it starts and stops. Its implications are different. It could be quite small, micro, and yet invoke and bring forth the full force of that systemic oppression, in which case, in size, it's really much more significant. Does that make sense? Okay. So, as far as who's most influential on the status level, it's whoever's paying attention. As far as who's most influential at the rank level, it's whoever can get their bearings. It's much more difficult. It's pretty easy to come up with a performative response to any oppressive action. You can imagine what you wish you'd said, what you'd like to say next time, etc. But it's much more difficult to decipher all that might be going on. The socio-historical, political, economic context of any given moment or larger story. So a shortcut is, instead of asking the size of the incident to determine whether it's oppressive, consider first the direction. Who is being affected by it? If members of a marginalized community or individual people from a marginalized group are being affected, there's a very, very good chance this is an example of oppression. If the person being affected is a member of the dominant group, it's probably an example of somebody playing high status on them, which is going to end very soon. Yeah? Okay. So, the example I give all the time, I've been giving this example for years, and people tell me, don't forget to tell that thing, so I will. I was called in to help with a situation in an elementary school in Olympia. And this was a predominantly white school, and by that I mean there were no people of color there. And an African-American third grader had come into the school, and they'd come in a little bit late, and within a few weeks, this student was having all kinds of problems. Eventually, this student shoved a classmate and ended up in the principal's office for bullying, right? So, the student was asked by parents and teacher and principal and counselor, what happened that brought you to that point of anger? What happened that brought you to that place where you shoved a classmate? And the student said, I don't know. Were you mad? Yep. What were you mad about? I don't know. Did they call you a name? No. Did they treat you badly? No. Did something happen? No. So this child starts the conversation with me by saying, I don't know what's wrong with me. I don't know why I did that. Parents are saying, we don't know what's happening. Our child has never had these kind of problems before, academic, behavioral. So my task was to observe. And I watched a lot of things, and I wrote this beautiful report, which I can't find. I can only remember a few of the things. I remember very clearly this child using a chair in an interaction in the classroom, and the chair remaining empty for the rest of the class time. Just remaining empty. I remember clearly the student saying something in the middle of, in a conversation, and his statement floating and then dropping like a leaf onto the ground. And someone else saying the same thing, you know this one, and then that got lots of connected comments. It happened not once. I watched for one day. It happened many times. And then I remember clearly in the hallway where everybody was kind of crashing against each other. There was a lot of incidental contact. He got none. Now, nobody went like this. They didn't have to. They just went like this. So these dynamics of passive racism are informed, of course, by implicit bias. And they show up how much of the time? 100% of the time. The impact on him was cumulative over a period of weeks because he had been in a predominantly African-American school all his life. And he'd never experienced those things, but even he could not point them out to you or himself. Rank is about these systemic, constant, insistent, pervasive, dehumanizing, paper cut upon stab wound dynamics that occur every day, all the time, on all channels of social membership, and which we cannot come to consciousness about, really. We can come to some consciousness about, but it's that iceberg thing. You can, for each one that you notice, there's many more you don't. So, when we want to apply this, we want to figure out what to do. Let me give you an example of how status and rank interact. I'm kind of choosing to put rank over here and status over there because that's where the lights are and I don't want to walk over there. So status dynamics start and stop. They can be intense, but they are lighter in structure in that they stop, okay? Even the most extreme act, if it stops, it stops. When they finish drilling at the dentist, it's over. This is drilling all day, every day, constantly, all the time. You feel that? Okay, so we're going to picture two people from a marginalized community, two people who carry target membership, two people who do not carry privilege in a particular arena, interacting with one another in a playful, high-status way. Can you visualize it? They're using words you're not supposed to use. They're carrying out behaviors that look a little potentially problematic under other contexts. They may be making some physical contact, some of which might be partly harsh, right? So visualize that going on over there. Any two members, both of the same target group. So picture whoever you want. Over here, imagine a member of the dominant group, a person of privilege, observing that game and studying it like a good anthropologist for many hours and days, trying to understand every subtlety of the game in order to be able to join the game, right? So this person is perceiving only the status layer. They're imagining there's a way you do it. If you say it with the right intonation, if you have the right intention, you can participate in the game. Now I start to picture that as me. As I start to walk towards that dyad, what do you want to say to me? Yeah, I can't hear your words, but the tone is exactly right. No, don't do it. I can't explain to you in the length of time why, but don't do it. What's going to happen is that dynamic is perhaps occurring at a status-only level. When this person joins it, they bring the full weight of rank to bear. So it doesn't really matter how they say the word or how they behave or what their intention is. Their sheer presence brings the full force of that rank layer. And it goes from something you could maneuver and modulate at the interactional level to something that you can't really begin to talk about because it goes so far beyond words. Okay, no idea how I'm doing for time?
Yeah, we're running
A little behind? Dang it. Okay, so we have 9 areas of social membership I want you to always keep track of. Picture them as 9 screens on everybody's body. So I have my age screen, my disability screen, my religion screen. All my screens are always on. They don't ever go off. And they're always talking to all your screens for a minimum of, I can't do the math, how many conversations, right? All of these areas are our robotic layer, our programmed, systemic socialization and conditioning layer, where we are essentially the Borg. We are programmed. Resistance is? You will be by the time you're 3. By the time you're 3 years of age, that layer of you, of all of us, will be assimilated into supremacies of 9 kinds. They are here for you to observe. So all of these supremacies are active all of the time. They are a hum that is occurring all of the time. And it's mechanical. It's not a conscious process. So, in order to really understand this, to work with this, I need you to tune in this thing called truth reality that I invented, which of course everybody else resonates with. Hold in your dominant hand a big T for truth. Whatever it is you would go to the wall about, whatever you take for ultimate, whatever is just sacred for you. And in the other hand, hold the weight of R, reality. How many genders are there? What's the truth of that? Exactly, right? The truth of how many genders are there is, or if you go to the gender conferences, you can have the conversation. There's the people who say 3, the people who say 5, there's a 6, there's a 16, there's a 19, there's a 124, and it goes beyond that. So, guess what? All those people don't agree with each other except on one thing: not two. No matter how you work it, there are not 2 genders, ultimately in that big T truth thing. And then most of the time, how many bathrooms? There's your truth and reality. The truth is, all of these categories of membership are false. Every single one of these categories of social membership, ascribed social membership, are false. Every one of them is a construct. Every one of them problematic in its history. The truth is, we can unpack that. The reality is it continues to act as if valid. Right? Okay. So how to approach this is, don't get too attached to the categories themselves as identities. Our identity lives in the power core, and it is our response to these assignations. Okay, let me say that one again. Our identity is not these categories, but our response, our lived response to these memberships. The memberships themselves are just the categorizations, all of which are fundamentally supremacist. In every case, the supremacist group is smaller than the marginalized and the oppressed group. So the term minority-majority is very problematic. Okay, what to do? Well, there are some skills I want to invite you to notice. I'm going to move through this quite quickly. In an area where you have agent membership, hopefully you had time to notice at least one area where you have agent membership. That means that in the Borg system, you were assigned an area of supremacy. If you're between the ages of 18 and 65, you can use age for that, as I will. Otherwise, you use other ones. This is a holarchical model, which is a nested bowl kind of model that represents the skills that we use in our Borg robotic layer to respond to that hum that is always present. Really wish I had my both hands for this one, but okay. So the first skill is indifference, which looks like this. What does this have to do with me? If I talk to you about Saturnians, you will probably not be that interested in the rest of the lecture. Saturnians, you'll be like, well, there's a few of you who won't, but most of you are going to be like, Saturnians? Really? I came here for an implicit racial bias conference. Stop talking about Saturnians. The stance is, that doesn't have anything to do with me. Which, when full and healthy, spills chocolate fountain-like into the next one, called distancing, which is, I don't have a problem with those people, as long as they stay over there. Or, I do have a problem with them, or I want to help them. Or, I want something from them. Which, when full and healthy, spills into inclusion, the skill of embrace. Come in. I don't see you as other. I don't see you as different. Leave your otherness at the door and then come in. I come up against the force field now of really relativizing my experience. This is not something that happens naturally, but it's something that we are all developmentally wired to seek. It's kind of a paradox. It won't happen naturally, but we're all driven to it. To shift out of our ego and ethnocentric frame of reference and come over to the place of relativizing our experience. Hey, I was born and raised and I exist in a particular moment with a particular context. And that context informs a huge percentage of who I end up being. And a big part of that is recognition of my own advantages and privilege. That's awareness. Awareness is not awareness of the target group. It's awareness of my lived experience, but usually not felt privilege. Wherever I go, there's a people mover getting me there faster, however you want to concretize it. And then finally, allyship, which is the ability to normalize the discomforts of guilt and shame associated with awareness and put them to work on behalf of justice. The target model looks a little different. The first skill is the skill of adapting, surviving. Anything that doesn't help me survive, I cut it off. Oh, there goes a limb. I will do anything I have to do. I will accommodate and shape-shift in order to make agents around me comfortable, because that's how my survival is ensured. This is an unconscious process. When that's working, the next skill can begin to arise, and it's the skill of confusion. Wait a second. What just happened? How did I get here? Who am I? What is happening? I don't fit in anywhere. How do I connect? If this skill is nice and strong and it doesn't get settled, then we become available to the force field. So we can take our red pill in both models. The red pill experience totally radicalizes you into a realization of, I know what's wrong. I begin to perceive oppression. I begin to understand its function. I begin to become feelingful about it. And guess what the feeling is? Anger, fury. And that, by the way, often connects to high status behavior. So I am going to become empowered, and I'm going to have conversations with everyone all of the time using charts. The next skill is called strategy. And this is where, instead of just being in the bubbling over experience of empowerment, I begin to slow down enough to see what my work is. Is it my work to educate white people? And the amazing amount of time that suddenly gives me, right? All of a sudden, I have the ability to choose where I am going to allocate my energy. And finally, recentering, which is that grounded place that allows me to be where I am, which is a target valuing, target lifting up center from which I move and return to. Now, nobody lives here. The skill sets for both of these are distributed, unfortunately, this way. The first skill and then the last skill. So whatever the range of anybody is, if your range occupies 3 skills, it means you still use the first skill the most. So those moments are really few and far between. Everything on the other side of the double line is an expression of power. An expression of power. Am I doing?
You're doing all right.
Okay, I'm doing all right. I don't know what that means. How much time I have? I want to talk a little bit about economy of energy. In the realm of the military, if a group of soldiers, enlisted personnel, are outside accomplishing a task, and an officer arrives, what do? They have to stop and they have to suspend, right? Awaiting orders. And then they're given either a release message or an order, right? The early target skills are characterized by a similar structure. Most energy for target members is allocated to managing that hum. It's sort of like being on hold most of the time. and not really having the opportunity to allocate our energy in the way that we would choose. So the biggest difference between the two roles, agent and target, is that, the economy of energy. Because you can take an individual person with mostly or all agent memberships, and they can have lived an experience through which through some mechanism resulted in a lot of suffering and difficulty. Of course it can happen. And you can find somebody whose memberships are target memberships, and because of their incredible resilience, has a beautiful life. So how we want to unpack it instead is think in terms of how the socialization permits the shaping of the personality around allocation of energy. Agent members, the areas of each of us that is assigned agent membership, is an area where we get to allocate our energy freely. And all our target memberships are the ones where we have to deal with all of the barriers, felt and not felt, visible and invisible, that are in place through the socialization process. Maybe that one made sense, maybe not, but I wanted to tell you about it. So it's the biggest difference. The role is a different shape. In the channels, I call these channels my TV areas, where age, disability, religion, ethnicity, etc., all the areas where I carry agent membership, here's what's playing. You are good, you belong, you deserve, you did well. Nobody appreciates you enough. That's what's playing. That's what's playing in all of those channels, all of the time. It's reculturing me, it's reculturing you towards me. All the channels where I have target membership, here's what's playing. Try harder, don't take up space, don't make waves, you're not safe. Don't challenge, don't be too good, don't do anything wrong. Right? Wear the right thing, don't do X, Y, and Z. So the load is really different in terms of our socialization. And that's why the skill sets are different. And that's why the whole concept of dialoguing at an equal table doesn't help us, because we need a table of equity, not a table of equality. Okay.
10 minutes.
Great. All right, so I'm going to give you an image that goes to the agent side of what I just said. The more agent memberships we have, each of us has, the more entitlement, unconscious entitlement we carry. Now I'm going to give you an image for this. If a person has a lot of agent memberships, I want you to picture a bubble. I call it the entitlement bubble. A bubble full of something that smells like rotten eggs. What is that, sulfur or something? Yes. I just realized that's kind of a demonic implication, but that's okay. So, there's this bubble, a big bubble of icky smelling stuff, right? Regardless of the intention that I may have as an agent member, as I approach a member of the target group, they get hit with my stench long before they have the opportunity to encounter my beautiful soul. Unless I own my agency. Because see, that's what awareness does. When I own my agency, I want you to picture that bubble getting smaller. As I own my agency, the concentration of the bad smell is going to get stronger. But ideally, I'll be the only one smelling it. So the more I own my agency, the better the chances that I can stick my hand out beyond the bubble of entitlement to make contact. Now this, of course, happens in occasions that are few and far between. The more someone calls themselves, the more I call myself an ally in an area of agency, the stinkier my bubble. So I'm trying to convince my students of this. Stop calling yourself an ally. Let that be an assigned membership that target members give to you. Okay. To begin to wrap things up, I want you to notice that whatever you focus on will increase. Whatever you focus on will increase. This is just a fundamental principle of how our attention works. So close your eyes for a second. I want you to picture somebody. I'll be really quick with this. Picture somebody who you associate with the word wisdom, clarity, resilience, the best kind of transformative humor, the capacity to come into an environment that is totally loaded with bad stuff, and just by their presence begin to clear it. Someone who can hear multiple perspectives, even seemingly opposing perspectives in a room, and hold them well. Picture someone like that and put your hand on your heart when you've got somebody that you can associate to that. You've now touched into that core of power. We all are that person. We all can be that person. It can come through the practice of your spiritual discipline, perhaps. But here's a message I want to send to you that I received gloriously in the workshop I went to this morning. Let your spiritual practice inform your activism. But don't stop there. Let your activism inform your spiritual practice also. So it's not just how your power center can go out into the world and influence everybody through the mechanisms of, your capacity to transcend and awaken and embody and connect. It's also how your activism and your critical analysis can then return to those zones of transcendence and inform them and contextualize them. It's just as important that you go that direction as well. Okay, in order to do this work well, you have to let go of something that you are addicted to. And that is a fix. We want to make it better. Of course we want to make it better. Let go of the idea that we can make it better by fixing it. And instead consider that we can make it better by awakening to it, by coming to clarity about it. And so I want to make a distinction between social justice and social change work and social justice education. Social justice education has all kinds of specialized language, lots of charts, lots of things you point to, lots of performance. If you get an email that went wrong somehow and it's full of Z's and A's, it's showing you the code, we don't want to see the code. You don't want to go to your therapist's office, if you go to therapy, and have them say to you, I am now going to apply cognitive behavioral approaches or Rogerian approach. We don't want to see the code. We want to walk into an environment and have the stuff make sense to us. We want to be met where we are. So feel the difference between using all of this kind of information to inform how you work and how you meet each person, and the telling them the information. So let's start to break that habit of imagining that instructing people is liberating them. That's the invitation. Implicit bias is affecting all of us. We can point to it, that's okay, but it's only a short little lived thing. We can cultivate the conditions that inform the possibility of being awake to it. And if I'm asleep to it, you wake me. And if you're asleep to it, I wake you, and that's our contract. Okay.